Hello everyone, my name is Pedro Ramón y Cajal Ramo, and I'm very proud to be here and be able to present to you the following paper, Understanding the Ethical and Regulatory Boundaries of the Military Actuation on the Cyberspace, written with the help of my colleague Jorge Maestre Vidal. I will begin the presentation with a short introduction and background commentary, followed by a discussion of existing terminology, a discussion of the legal and doctrinal aspects, a study of the just war principles, international humanitarian law. I will give you some hybrid and ethical considerations and end with some final conclusions. As most of you will know, cyberspace has become an essential arena in both the civilian and the military spheres. It's a fundamental pillar of our economy, our society, our democracy. And it brings many advantages and helps us in lots of ways, but it also brings profound risks, which their study is of great importance. More precisely, in this text, we've focused our analysis from an international perspective. This means state versus state, where international law and treaties apply. Some of the characteristics of cyberspace, as many of you will know, are its novelty, its asymmetry, the anonymity, the huge reach and power it can have, the possibility of reuse. All of them pose a new range of threats that can influence not only the military actuations, but on the political, social, and economical aspects of society. It's also important to highlight these types of operations when carried out by states and their non-state appearance, and the difficulty to attribute responsibility to them. These types of actions are a reality and their use is exponential, so to face it, a lot of work needs to be done on the ethical, the lexical, and the legal aspects that surround it. Otherwise, it will be impossible to move forward, and we need to talk the same language. Cyberspace also gives rise to the hybridization of threats and an increase in the gray zone actions. Later on, I will explain in more detail. Cyberspace actions are blurring the lines between war and peace. And what can be confirmed is that traditional kinetic attacks are widely rejected by society. So making cyber attacks, which can be as destructive but much more discreet, it's very interesting for attackers. To begin, it's important to comment on existing terminology. Since cyberspace is so new, so are the words that describe it. For this study, I have focused mainly on the documents you see on the screen, but I have given special importance to NATO's joint publication 320 on cyberspace operations, as well as the Tallinn manual, its second version. Its third version is currently under development. And I've also taken into account the UN, the US, and the NATO databases. In all of these documents, it's very difficult to find a shared and homogeneous definition. Some countries have done great efforts to do so and develop the situation, but common harmonization is a very tedious and slow process. Therefore, this text has no other intention than to achieve this and facilitate the integration of the most advanced definitions, all in order to give a common understanding of cyberspace and its operations and actions. The paper talks about cyberspace operations, cyber actions, cyber warfare, cyber weapons, but its main efforts are focused on cyberspace defensive operations and offensive operations. All the concepts discussed before are important, but in the field of military operations, we must focus on these two. The former, defensive cyberspace operations, are the ones that are currently receiving the most attention from states, as their aim is to protect society, allied cyberspace, or the course of military operations. Their use is pretty obvious. They include passive or purely preventive actions, as well as active actions aimed at anticipating different attacks, pursuing threats, and making sure allied cyberspace is protected. There is little doubt about this type of actions, since it's the objective of every state to defend itself. But the problem arises when states use cyberspace offensively. Cyber operations in attack are not entirely justified at the international level, and this is due to the uncertainty of the collateral effects. Being such an interconnected system that does not respect geographical borders, the unintended and far-reaching effect it can have is enormous, either on civilians or on the interests of another country that we didn't want to touch. This can create serious problems and controversies, especially in relation to the violation of the non-intervention principle. Until the framework of offensive cyberspace operations is not clearly developed, moral principles, international humanitarian law, and just war principles must be applied. To endure this type of operations, an active and informed political leadership is required, as well as a deep technical knowledge, because if not, collateral effects could reach a higher magnitude. States can attribute responsibility to them to another state and declare a formal war. As some of you may know, actions from one state to another state can be considered an armed attack, an act of aggression, a use of force, or a violation of the non-intervention principle. Although in cyberspace it's not clear how to categorize the various possible operations within these categories, this paper intends to motivate experts to create these categories and to assign cyber operations to one of them a gravity, a severity, and a possible legal response. Talking now about legal and doctrinal aspects, it should be noted that this is an area that is very underdeveloped. In order to be able to respond, national cybersecurity strategies, operational military doctrine, and rules of engagement must be taken into account now. There's no legal framework that can be applied. And as long as there is no legal basis, most countries in the world have recognized that international law applies to cyberspace operations. In any case, as the European cybersecurity strategist indicates, the interconnectivity and interconnectedness of cyberspace must be urgently worked on and developed. We've seen certain directives, but only with the aim of defensive actions, with the aim of protecting and defending information systems and critical infrastructure. It's also that apart from these directives, hybrid considerations must be introduced when developing new legislation, bearing in mind that a cyber operation may end up affecting society in its whole. So on economic, political, health levels we've talked before. So it must be a much more severe and deep legislation. All of this in order to harmonize the different definitions, associate a similar gravity to all of these new situations, establish shared methods of attributing responsibility, and on and on. We need to develop this area the same way as we've developed another areas deeply. The most significant progress it's made by NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, currently working on the Tayin Manual 3.0. In addition, having seen the legal scope applicable to cyberspace and that is not fully developed, it is of great importance to know that the principles of just war and international humanitarian law must apply. These have no other objective than to limit the effects of an armed conflict and limit the suffering and the unnecessary pain and injury done to civilians and combatants. International humanitarian law is part of public international law and includes the Hague Regulations of 1907, the 4 Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, and they seek to protect fundamental rights and limit harm. Due to the characteristics of cyberspace, as we have seen, it's important that these aspects are applied, as cyber attacks have serious consequences on a wide range of public services and interests. Capacity of damage is enormous, and to this we must add the difficulty of tracking the attackers. Principles are varied, and all of them are of great importance, but we need to establish a distinction between combatants and non-combatants in cyberspace, a clear distinction. And militaries must attack only combatants. These are very important rules that currently are not being followed. If identified a country doing so, it will be considered a violation of the international humanitarian law, and consequences of the perpetrator are much more serious. Next, the hybrid and ethic considerations, which are very new. It's a very interesting new theme. As we have seen before, this is due to the interconnectivity that cyberspace can have. Cyberspace is totally interdependent. A cyber operation can have an effect in the political, the social, the economical, even the health spheres at the same time. A well-trained and organized attacker can concentrate his efforts on the use of these techniques and cause great damage and obtain huge benefit for its personal interests, because no one can say it has been him. It's been him. And all this without going the threshold of a formally declared conflict. As we all know, the black zone is a purely declared war, white zone is peace. We mean the gray zone, where cyber operations occur, are a mixture between war and peace. The European Commission, in several of its pronouncements, has stressed that the conventional and non-conventional methods that we've seen and that cyberspace offers, if coordinated, can have a great impact and they become a new weapon. Countries need to understand that cyberspace is a new battlefield, that if it's not respected, it will have similar consequences as in other scenarios. And lots of consideration must be developed. In any case, a country reacting to an operation in cyberspace must meet the principles of necessity, proportionality, and immediacy. The reports of the hybrid COE are also strongly recommended to study, as they unify the position of experts from all around the world. Now, in order to end the presentation, we are going to present you the conclusions we've achieved. Firstly, we can state that the existence of coordinated and synchronized cyber attacks aiming to different vulnerabilities of states are a reality, and they can have a huge hybrid impact. An example of it are disinformation and propaganda campaigns, which can influence in electoral processes and have a huge potential to destabilize society and make lose confidence towards the government. Secondly, cyber attacks are primarily directed by states and their non-state appearance. This attitude is very dangerous, and focus must be concentrated on identifying actuators. Focus must be identify states that are doing so under the appearance of anonymity. Consequently, there's a special need to categorize cyber activities attach a gravity to each of them, establish a legal consequence, and create ways to enforce compliance. This is the most important conclusions we expose to you. This is difficult due to the lack of geographical boundaries, but intelligence gathering, cyber exploitations, the new internet protocol, traceback technical tools will make identification easier. Territoriality is also a matter of discussion where work must be done, and all of this with no other intention than to bring and achieve a safer digital ecosystem that permits a correct use of the ICT capabilities and offers a great tool to support and create and improve all sectors of society. Finally, we strongly recommend states to limit their offensive actions due to the uncertainty of the effects and the probable damage on civilian infrastructure and interests. This, if identified, could lead to a formally declared conflict. So that's a situation that everyone wants to prevent nowadays. I hope this presentation has been of your interest. It's been an honor to be here, and I'm sure there's a lot of work to be done, but the issue will be developed. Thank you very much for your attention, and hope to see you soon. Bye.